And welcome back, everybody. Hands on Apologetics. We're chatting with Keith Nestor, talking about the Eucharist, drawing people into the church. The sacred space, that's a concept that's really not appreciated that much by Protestants. It's kind of like their worship services orientated towards a real absence, where with the Catholic Church, it's orientated to the real presence.
Yeah, it's interesting, though, because I don't think they would put it that way, right? I think a lot of Protestants have this sense, that where two or three are gathered, Jesus is there and in the midst of them, okay? Yep. So there's this sense that everyone wants that proximity to Jesus. Everyone wants that feeling of, yes, I am with God. God is with me here, And I remember reading when we'd have worship services, the worship leader would say things like, okay, we're going to enter into the throne room of God right now, and there would be people at times who would take their shoes off because they're like, this is holy ground. And I think we long for that. That's why I feel like when it comes to the Eucharist, when we as Catholics can articulate where we have that sense of desire, then it makes a lot of sense. And I think that can draw people in, because it's kind of like the argument for the existence of God based on the desire that we all have to connect with something beyond ourselves, right? I think it was C.S. Lewis who said that the desire that we have for God proves that God must exist, because we don't hunger for things that don't exist. You can't be thirsty if there's no water. You can't be hungry if there's no food. You can't have this desire to connect with God if God wasn't even real. So I think that the same thing could be taken to that extent when it comes to the Eucharist, that all believers have this desire to be with Jesus. And it's interesting because the belief in the Eucharist puts context around Jesus' words when he promises to be with us to the end of the age. We have this understanding that that's fulfilled in the Eucharist, that Jesus, when he's present with us in the Eucharist, that's the context of that fulfillment of that promise. And we can look to that and live into that, and it can make our lives so much more meaningful. So I think that people want that. It's just they don't realize that it can be a reality for them. So they have to, in their minds, then go, okay, well, this just must be about this mood that I can create, or this environment that I can create with my worship or whatever, or this community that we have of people. But we're not really with God, other than this idea that, okay, well, where two or three are gathered, there am I in the midst. Okay, yeah, that is true to a certain way, but it's even more true when we look at the Eucharist. And I think people when they can understand that, I think that draws people in.
I think there's a kind of palpable feeling of Christ's presence in the Catholic Church when the host is reserved there. I mean, even I've heard stories about atheists who come into a church and they just know they might not even understand it, but they know there's something different about being inside a Catholic church than being somewhere else. And so if you don't have that, then you kind of have to manufacture, something similar, like you said, with, having great music or having a kind of generate emotional milieu that you kind of feel like there is, that the presence of God is palpable, but it's fleeting, though,
Yeah.
Where in the church it's there, whether you feel it or not, whether you're emotional or not.
Yeah, I had a Protestant friend of mine. I invited him to adoration one night, and he decided to come. He'd never, and when I met him in the parking lot outside, I said, I need to explain to you what's going on in there before you walk in there. I need to give you some context. And I asked him, I said, do you understand what the Catholic Church teaches about the Eucharist? Of course, he doesn't even know what the word Eucharist is, because they, refer to it as communion.
Right.
So I explained to him what that means. And he just looked at me and said, Keith, I've never been inside a Catholic church before, ever. And I said, okay. And I literally had 1 minute to explain to him the doctrine of the real presence. Okay. This incredible thing. we're walking up to the church, and I'm about to explain to him what's going to happen when we walk into adoration. This is a kid who's kind of a Pentecostal, but he has this desire for Jesus. And we walk into the church. It's, an adoration, an hour, holy hour that we do. But our holy hours, we all take turns, kind of like a lot of churches. And it starts after the 12:05 Mass on Friday, and it goes all the way into the 8 a.m. Mass on Sunday. And then Jesus is reposed. So my hour was 10 p.m. to 11 p.m. Well, this young man came with me, he drove over an hour to come down to the church. And at the end of the time, I was getting up to leave, and I walked over to him and I said, "Hey, our time here is done." And he looks at me and he goes, "Is it okay if I stay here?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Is it okay if I stay here all night?" And I said, "You can stay here as long as you want to." And I saw our priest had walked in. He would come in after me. And I went back, I told him, I said, "Hey, see this young man up here? He's a Protestant. He's never been to a church before. He wants to stay here, all night." And he's like, "Okay, great." Well, the next week I saw this young man, and he told me he didn't stay all night, but he stayed till like 3 o'clock in the morning.
Wow.
And he said to me, "I don't understand all of the differences between Catholicism and what I am." He goes, "I don't understand any of that." He said, "But what I can tell you is this: there's something powerful happening in there."